Shadows of the unseen, the abyss below. As Eric leafed through the yellowed pages, the air grew heavier with the musty scent of paper and secrets. The writings detailed experiments that blurred the lines between organic life and mechanical interference, a concept so outlandish it rivaled the plot of a science fiction novel. Shadows played across the room as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long fingers through the dusty windows. Every creak and moan of the old house now seemed to echo with a sinister tone, as if the building itself disapproved of the revelations being unearthed. Eric, ever the realist, tried to rationalize the notes as the ramblings of a brilliant mind gone askew. Yet, the meticulous detail in the diagrams, the careful annotations, and the genuine excitement that leaped from every page suggested a mind not lost, but frighteningly focused. Pushing back a swell of unease, Eric decided to explore further, driven by a need to understand his uncle's legacy. His journey through the house took him from room to chilly room, each one unveiling more gadgets and gizmos that defied logical explanation, their function as mysterious as their creator. Each step Eric took seemed to echo into the depths, swallowed by the chilling silence that returned more oppressive each time. He stumbled upon a laboratory more intact than the others, its surfaces cluttered with petri dishes and microscopes, alongside more unsettling apparatus that defied immediate understanding. The air was thick, charged with electricity, as if the very atmosphere was alive with Harold's unholy experiments. Screens flickered to life unexpectedly as Eric moved through the room, displaying looping footage of surgical procedures, hybridization processes, and horrifyingly, a larger creature that defied nature, the Entity. It was a tapestry of flesh and technology, its form constantly shifting, adapting. The videos showed it learning, growing, a prototype of evolution forced and unnaturally accelerated. A sudden crash behind him spun Eric around, his heart racing. A smaller hybrid, reminiscent of a human crossed with arachnid features, its limbs clicking against the cold floor, had knocked over equipment in its stirring. Its eyes, too human, stared at him with a haunting, pained intelligence. Eric backed away slowly, realizing that Harold's creations were not just experiments, they were sentient, suffering, trapped between worlds by a man who played God. The corridor outside offered no respite, the flickering lights casting long shadows that twisted and seemed to writhe in the corners of Eric's eyes. The deeper he moved into this underground nightmare, the clearer the sounds became. Whispers, low growls, the occasional clank of metal. It was a symphony of the damned, each note echoing the madness that had consumed Harold Thompson. Eric knew then that he had to find a way out, not just to escape the physical horrors, but to preserve his own sanity against the dark revelations of his family legacy. Eric's trembling hands searched the pockets of his jeans, scrambling for anything that might aid his escape. His fingers closed around the small, heavy flashlight he'd been using to navigate the abyss. With a tight grip, born of desperation, he swung it at the nearest wall panel. The impact sent a dull thud echoing through the corridor, momentarily distracting the Entity. Sparks flew from the damaged panel, casting wild light over its twisted form. He didn't wait to see the creature's reaction. Turning on his heel, Eric sprinted down the corridor, his breath ragged, the sound of his own heartbeat thundering in his ears alongside the unsettling hums of the Entity. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, each turn and twist a mirror of the last, a maze constructed to trap both mind and body. Behind him, the sound of crashing and tearing grew louder as the entity freed itself from the constraints of its mechanical prison. Its pursuit was relentless, driven by a programmed need to eliminate any threat to its existence. Eric's mind raced, every logical thought drowned out by primal fear. But somewhere in the chaos, a memory surfaced. A ventilation shaft he had noticed earlier, hidden behind an old, rusted utility cart. Using the last reserves of his strength, Eric pushed forward, his legs burning with the effort. As he rounded the corner, the cart came into view, just as he remembered. Without slowing, he threw himself against it, dislodging the cart with a clatter that echoed down the empty halls. He pried open the grate and squeezed himself into the shaft, dragging the grate closed behind him. Inside the narrow, dust-choked passage, Eric pressed himself against the cold metal, holding his breath. The sound of the entity searching the room he had just vacated reverberated through the shaft. It was close, too close, but for the moment, he was out of its direct sight. Eric's heart pounded against his ribcage, each beat a loud drum in the quiet of his hiding spot. The wait was excruciating, a test of nerve and fear. Their progress, though fraught with setbacks, edged them closer to understanding the full horrific scale of Harold's ambition. As they delved into the encrypted files and cracked open sealed records, the scope of the devastation that could be unleashed by the entity became chillingly clear. It wasn't just about creating a new form of life, but reshaping existence itself, a godlike power Harold had sought to wield single-handedly. The implications were staggering, and Eric felt the weight of his uncle's hubris pressing down upon him, a legacy of darkness that he was determined to end. Amidst the tangled wires and cold metal surfaces, a particular document caught Sarah's attention. It was a faded photograph, edges curled and yellowed with age, showing a group of people in lab coats. Her hands trembled as she traced the face of a young man in the back row, recognition dawning with a mix of sorrow and fury. It was her brother, unmistakably younger, but with the same determined eyes. Her voice broke as she showed Eric, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just a mission to expose a mad scientist's work. It was deeply personal, a fight for her brother's memory. Their search became more frantic, driven by the dual engines of vengeance and justice. Sarah's knowledge of Harold's history, combined with Eric's growing understanding of the facility's layout, allowed them to navigate quicker, dodging lurking horrors that seemed almost aware of their intentions. As they approached what appeared to be the central control system for the entity, the air grew colder, the light dimmer, and the silence oppressively thick. Eric hacked into the mainframe, bypassing security protocols with codes gleaned from Harold's notes. The system whirred, ancient fans kicking up decades of dust and stale air. Sarah stood by his side, her eyes scanning every corner for movement. As Eric entered the final command, the building shuddered, a low groan echoing through the metal walls as if the house itself protested their actions. Minutes felt like hours as they waited, breaths held for any sign of change. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the humming stopped, the oppressive mechanical heartbeat of the abyss silenced. In its place, a quiet so profound it was disorientating. They looked at each other, a mix of disbelief and relief in their eyes, barely daring to hope they had succeeded in neutralizing the threat. Exhaustion clung to Eric and Sarah, like the shadows they had narrowly escaped beneath his uncle's house. Their final moments in the labyrinthine basement were a blur of terror and adrenaline as they outmaneuvered the entity, luring it into a trap that they had hastily rigged amongst the remnants of otherworldly machinery and grotesque biological constructs. With every ounce of strength left, they initiated the destruction of Dr. Harold Thompson's chilling work, watching as fire consumed the aberrant fusion of technology and organic matter. The ascent back to the main level of the house felt longer than it had ever been. Each step away from the abyss was a move toward a semblance of normalcy, yet the weight of what lay below seemed to press against the soles of their feet. They emerged into the dimming light of the day, the setting sun casting long shadows that momentarily made Eric flinch, seeing reminders of the horrors below in every elongated shape. As they stood in front of the now unassuming entry to hell, Eric took a deep, shuddering breath, his mind replaying the events that had unfolded. He turned to look at Sarah, her face smeared with soot and eyes wide with a cocktail of relief and lingering fear. They spoke little, but their shared glances were paragraphs of unspoken agreement and mutual understanding of the ordeal they had endured. With a nod, Eric closed the heavy basement door for the last time, the clang echoing a definitive end. The following days were a whirlwind of recovery and documentation. Eric, his hands still trembling slightly, documented every detail he could recall, the images and notes spread across his living room floor like a tapestry of madness. Sarah contributed her own findings, her journalistic instinct to uncover the truth, undeterred by the dangers they had faced. Together, they compiled a comprehensive account of the horrors, intending to hand over the evidence to the authorities. Eric knew that exposing his family's dark legacy was a betrayal of sorts, but the weight of his conscience demanded it. As Eric sealed the last envelope, filled with photos, lab notes, and digital backups of the laboratory's databases, he felt a chapter of his life closing. He had entered the house a skeptic, a man who believed only in what he could see and explain. Now he saw the world differently. The shadows lingered, not just in the corners of his vision, but in the recesses of his mind, a constant reminder of the thin veil between the known and the unknown. Sarah left the town shortly after, her story published to critical acclaim, yet met with skepticism. Eric stayed, the house feeling emptier than before, its corridors and rooms haunted by the echoes of a past too dark to ever fully erase. He struggled with the memories, the knowledge of what lay just beneath the surface of his own reality. Yet there was a strange solace in the fact that he had faced the abyss and survived, altered but alive. As he looked around the room, his eyes lingered on the sealed envelopes. A sense of duty overcame his fear, pushing him to pick up the phone and dial the number that would finally shed light on the darkness his uncle had created.